so happy to be among a community of people from whom I've learned so much. I mean, my supportive family and friends and neighbors and relatives and teaching colleagues from many circumstances. I've got some students I've had in class before as high school students and graduate students. I have parents of students I've taught before, so it just feels like a lovely gathering of the threads that are woven into this book. So thank you so much for coming. And thanks so much to Roberta and Sally for having us. As Roberta said, this was Nate's first job, I think. Yeah, Nate? At 16 or something. So we have a long connection with Broadway Books. And because independent bookstores are a bit of an endangered species, you know, we urge you to nose around a little bit afterwards and consider picking up some gifts for the holidays, or come back to Broadway Books again when you're in the neighborhood. It's just a great store, and they're always helpful. The genesis of the book actually comes from a very fortuitous, complete, absolute misunderstanding on my part. About 15 years ago, I got a new classroom teaching position, and I knew that I'd be teaching 6 sections of English at Lake Oswego High School. And most of those would be regular English classes, those diverse and democratic classes like most American public high school classrooms, where we have done this, you know, the most idealistic and important experiment in the history of world education, in my opinion, has been to put our young folks together and say, we're going to learn together, we're going to learn about each other and from each other and with each other, and make ourselves an educated populace. So we matched together the tuned in and the tuned out, and sweet and the snarky, and the enthusiast and the struggler, and we tried to make something out of that. Well, I know how to do that. I've done that. I did that for most of my teaching career. And I was ready. Yeah, bring them on. I was ready for that challenge. You know, as ready as anyone can be when you have to consider facing 100 teenagers every day from the first day after Labor Day on. But there was one other class in my new teaching assignment that had me a little bit worried. And that was a single period of senior honors advanced placement English. Commonly known as AP, advanced placement English. Now, I had never taught an honors or advanced placement class before. Most of my experience was those regular untracked classes with a detour of about 5 years into working with just profoundly alienated and struggling students in an alternative school program. So this was new. I'd been working with profoundly unmotivated students and regular English classes, and now I was going to teach the students that I began to think in my mind were pre-motivated. And well, I thought this will be interesting and a good challenge too, and I'm ready. The only thing that worried me a little bit about it is that, you know, with advanced placement, there's this high stakes, high pressure national test that comes every May. 300,000 American high school students take it, and if they get a certain score, they can get college credit. And you know, to me personally, gearing an entire year's instruction to a single exam, almost half of the score of which is based on multiple choice questions, is just way too low and unworthy a standard for our students. So I went to my new department chair with my old friend Ricky Gorat, she's right back there, a great old friend of mine, and I said, you know, how much institutional concern is there about these test scores? And she said, and I should have anticipated this knowing Ricky, the test isn't what matters. What matters is giving students a high power, high caliber experience in critical reading and thinking and writing, just like we want with all our students. Just let them soar. So I knew, I'm working in the right place. This is great. That's what I wanted to hear. But I did think I should know something about the advanced placement standards that the College Board, the Association of Colleges that has American colleges that set up these advanced placement classes, knew. So I went to the teacher whose position I inherited, and I said, what materials do you have? And she had one folder with about 10 articles in it, and they were all about teaching literature using Freud or myths, or both. then as I was carrying in boxes of teaching materials, she said, "I'm not quite the archivist of my teaching life that you are." But also in the folder there was a little booklet from the College Board, and it said, "This is the standards for advanced placement." So I said, "Oh, here it is. This is what it's going to take to have an officially sanctioned AP class." And I started reading. I read the first couple pages, and then everything after that was about the test in May. So I didn't read anymore because I figured, you know, I can get to that in the springtime. The test, that's down the line. But there was something on those first couple pages that surprised me. It said, the focus of an advanced placement class is to be literary criticism. I thought, well, that's interesting. That's the formal academic discipline of critical thinking and reading about books. And I don't know, I liked that stuff when I was an undergraduate and graduate major in English, but it's kind of an esoteric field and it's sort of daunting for high school students. I wonder what AP teachers are doing with 16 and 17-year-olds in this field. So I went to my local bookstore. Well, I went to my local chain bookstore. Sorry.
It's all right.
And they have shelves of stuff on AP English literature classes, but it's all test preparation. I thought that's fine, but I can deal with that in the spring. And I went online, I looked at teacher resources, I hunted around, and I could find hardly anything on teaching literary criticism to high school students. So I thought, well, I have to create my own materials, I guess, which is one of the things I love about teaching. And so with that first year of a very extraordinarily good-natured guinea pig class of students, I thought, we're going to do some exploring in literary criticism. And my entry point with those students was kind of like this, and it's the entry point of the book too. I said to the students, you know, we all have our own preferences, likes, and dislikes as readers. Let's try to articulate those. Let's try to put words to those that are, you know, push a little bit beyond the "this is a turkey and I don't like it" level of thinking about books. What books do you love? What books do you love? What books do you just want to take with you when you have to give away all the other books in your library? What books did you fall in love with when you were a kid? And why? What are the qualities of those books? What draws you to reading? What are the books you've loved in school? What are the books you've hated in school? What books would you recommend we keep in the curriculum? What books would you recommend we throw out? That got a pretty lively response. What books would you add that aren't in there now? I mean, you know, talking with young folks about whether Harry Potter should be a required book in the English curriculum is an interesting conversation. And what do you think every high school student should be made to read, and why? So the students started giving voice and articulating, I think, a little bit better and more carefully what they thought made for good literature, why literature might be important. And I've actually put a lot of students' accounts into the book. So my student Jenny said she liked novels that help her better understand the inner workings of another mind, another human being's mind. Well, that's kind of a way of talking about what we've traditionally known as forms of psychological criticism. And David said he liked being exposed to different writing styles and techniques that would help him become a better writer himself. Well, looking at different writing styles and techniques is formalist criticism or new criticism. And Katie said when we study literature of the past, we get a chance to understand another culture or another time period. We get a new historical perspective. Well, there's historical schools of criticism. That's exactly what they're doing. Kelsia said, with literature we can see through the eyes of an abused child, a Bosnian refugee, a soldier in Vietnam. Literature is a chance to step away from our own perspective. And that's a traditional focus of a kind of moral criticism. The British Romantic poets talked about the empathetic imagination. Atticus Finch, you know, Atticus Finch, or To Kill a Mockingbird said, we have to step into other people's shoes. So after letting students assess their own angles of approach to literature, I said, let's look at some others too. So I don't want you to give up the way You read what you bring to a book, but let's look at some other perspectives. Let's put some names to them, and let's see what we might want to add to our toolkit as readers. So that first year I experimented with a whole bunch of approaches, not only those ones I've mentioned, but we looked at feminist criticism and many lively varieties of political criticism. We looked at philosophical criticism. My son Josh was a philosophy major in college, you know, and he had given me his book list from his philosophy and literature class. There's all these different ways of looking at criticism, and those different ways of thinking about approaching a book became different chapters in this book. And that's it in a nutshell. I wanted the book to be readable and enjoyable too. One of the things I always tried to avoid in my classroom that I hope I avoided in writing this book was, well, I think it was well described by Joseph Heller in his wonderful novel, Catch-22. You know the character of Clevenger in that novel, who Heller describes as Clevenger, who knew everything about literature but how to enjoy it. And that's what I really wanted to avoid with my students and in this book. So I hope it's readable. There are plenty of students who share the notion that literature is a kind of complicated, bedeviling puzzle that can be put together in only one way, that there are all kinds of tricks involved in the solution, and that the teacher knows the secret code while students do not. Classroom discourse about literature for the Roys of the world seems a matter of trying to guess, often in frustration, what they believe the teacher knows to be the true meaning of the text. The true meaning of the text. So why beat around the bush? Just tell us. What I hope students will get out of our classroom work surrounding any particular literary text is not a specific interpretation or set of conclusions. Rather, I hope they'll get better at reading and thinking critically for themselves, asking their own questions, finding their own interpretations and themes, and reaching their own conclusions. My genial interrogations are not intended to herd students towards some preordained answer, but to scatter them out into the field of independent thinking. And I go on and on a little bit, and I also don't think this has much to do with what I think about literature. I don't think there's a single meaning to any literary work. I think there are multiple meanings, right? Don't you find, I mean, we should all find our own truth in books, or lack thereof. Don't books mean different things to you even when you read them at different times in your lives? I had to read Pride and Prejudice at age 16. Miss Thelma Stonebrink, my junior English teacher, made me read Pride and Prejudice. And then I read it again on my own volition at 40, and it's amazing to me how much better that book had gotten. So, you know, great literature is almost defined by its inexhaustibility, by the multiple possibilities of it. Gertrude Stein said Hamlet's a great book because we can never get to the bottom of it. Italo Calvino says that the greatest works of literature are those which never stop generating new meanings. So, with these presumptions about both learning and literature, no wonder I was distressed by Roy's cut-to-the-chase remark about getting the answer, singular and spoon-fed, toward which he thought I was force-marching him. And so, because of Roy and all those who feel the same way, I've resisted as a literature teacher the temptation to settle for singular readings or to insist that I am the final authority on what things mean. Instead, for many years, I've been trying to find effective ways to convey to students the sense of literature's openness to multiple approaches and interpretations, and to give students strategies for tackling books, thereby cultivating the better readers and critical thinkers we so desperately need. Where I keep returning to support these goals is the field of literary criticism. Thus, this book on literary criticism is for all the Roys out there and for my colleagues, whom I regard with untellable admiration and affection, the teachers of all those Roys out there.
Yeah.